musical productions, and we had something to go on that I was going to tell about when I first started to play golf. It was on doctor's orders because I was kind of they found that I was a little bit anemic. But in going through the clinic, there was nothing the matter with me except I was just kind of poured out. And so the doctor ordered me at least 2 hours a day to get out of the house. He asked me when I'd had a vacation. I'd been married 10 years, and I hadn't had a single vacation, not one, hadn't ever gone anyplace. And he said, well, he compared me to a Cadillac car. He says, you've got a beautiful chassis, all right, but he said the most beautiful car in the world will run when its battery's down, so he said, you got to build up your battery. So they put me on a high-protein diet, and I had to spend at least 2 hours a day away from the house and out in the outdoors. So I started playing golf, but I was kind of weak, and first I would just walk around the course and carry a 7-iron and a putter, one club in each hand. And I'd walk the course, and when the men that I walked with, when they were approaching, then I would approach and putt with them, and that's as much as I did for the first couple of weeks. It was just the walking and the fresh air, and then of course golf became practically an addiction. The only way I could get time out to play golf was to go real early in the morning. So I'd get up early and I'd put on hot cereal to cook, plug the coffee in, and I'd take a bucket of balls and go out and shoot a bucket of balls. This didn't take as much time as walking the course, of course. And Eddie Jekyll lived just a block from me, and Eddie was about 9 years old, and he was just so crazy to play golf because his father and brothers were real sharp players. So he'd come out on his back steps and sit there. He could see my house from there, and I'd pick him up, and he'd shag my balls for me. So we'd go out for about an hour before breakfast, and this is how I got started. Well, before the year was out, I had won the club champion, the club tournament for that year. Eddie was such a little character. He was so devoted. He was so grateful for me to take him out because he'd also get to shoot. There was one day that when the finals were being played off, and I was in the finals, and Eddie appeared in a long, what did you call these golf suits? Plus fours? Blousy, and tied at the ankles, and the suit was too big for him, but it was white, and the sleeves were too long, and he rolled up the cuffs, and the pants were too big, and he looked like Dopey in the Seven Dwarfs, and he came out all dressed up to caddy for me in the finals. Well, it rained on us, and up on number 6 there was a big pine, a group of pine trees that had been burned by the lightning, and they formed a big V, and it was raining real hard, and so Eddie climbed in this fork of this where the two big trees, made a V, and he climbed in there, and we waited under that tree to get out of the rain, and when he came out, he had charcoal. He was all black, all up his back, and he did look so funny. But he was so devoted that it was just I just had to win for him, which I did. And before I played in the finals early in the summer, the pro and instructor out there started a round robin. And at that time, I was only using 3 clubs. I was using a 2-iron and a 7 and a putter, and I just carried them in my hands. And I won the round robin that lasted over a few weeks, and the prize was the first wood club that I owned was a driver. Now, I didn't like wood clubs. I was so used to orange, and I'd never used them. So then I had, we had two pianos, and I was giving instruction, each one, their beginning piano lessons. Later we did have music teachers, some. You took some lessons from other people. But I gave you your very beginning first piano lessons to all of you. And we used to spend 15 minutes apiece on piano in the mornings. And then Aunt Elizabeth had a little cottage at the back of her lot, and she rented it to a young man by the name of Eldon Ardrey, who came here to teach music and violin especially on the college campus. And being our neighbor there, we induced him to give an early morning lesson to little girls, and we bought violins appropriate from half size, three-quarter size. We all started with the three-quarter size. And one of the violins belonged to Uncle Ed, was up in the family attic over there. And that one we designated to Mary because she had the longest arms. And so that was Uncle Ed's violin that he had taken a few lessons when he was a child. Daddy always played the mandolin.
We had quite a little orchestra.
And David played the piano in that family. And but not, it was just sort of school activities for him. They never did very much with the music, except Daddy was quite musical. He could just pick up the mandolin and play. He could play anything on the mandolin, just pick it out. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, we would, in the mornings then, we established a routine that we did 15 minutes piano apiece, and we could arrange that with the pianos. And the violin lessons was a group lesson in the beginning because they were all just beginners, and they could take their violin lesson together. And Eldon would take the three little girls together. Sometimes one would be sitting on his knee, or two on each knee, and take turns playing. But they did so love him. He was so tender, and he was a splendid instructor for them. And later, of course, they played in the school orchestras, and especially through high school, and even after they went to college. Nobody followed a career, but musical career, but it was wonderful growing up. Discipline. They learned a value of time and a routine. This is the time for this, and this is the time for that. And it certainly took the place of discipline forever. Well, then there was a dancing teacher. What was the name? It was Thornburg, but what was the school that he came from? It evades me now, but it was a famous school, famous dancing school that he was trained by. But we started tap dancing and took tap and ballet, and we did that for several years with Forrest Thornburg. So we had this. You want to pick that up, Mary? We had this routine of 15 minutes of piano, 15 minutes of violin, and 15 minutes of tap dancing. This was a required routine before we went to school. We used to spend some time after school, but this was voluntary. If they wanted to practice, they could. And so I established a little system of paying them 25 cents for half an hour. If they wanted to earn a quarter and have extra spending money, they'd come and tell me, and I'd time them, and they would practice half an hour to earn this quarter, and it helped them build up a little bank account. The morning routine on the dancing, of course, we had to have a bare floor to dance on, and we had a 27-foot living room that had a lovely hardwood floor, and it had two big Wilton rugs in there, and we'd have to roll up one in order to have a place for the tap dancing practice. And of course the girls got so that the rug was rolled up every morning, and they would tell the neighbors that our rug was so used to being rolled up that all you had to do in our house was to go in and snap your fingers and it'd roll itself up. We had such nice neighbors that were so interested in all our accomplishments, and so they always made a great audience. Whenever we accomplished anything and polished it up and it was ready for performance, then we invited Uncle Will and Aunt Elizabeth Babbitt to come to the house, and we would perform for them. And this was an incentive when we really had it from memory and had it ready for performance. Why, they were the first ones to see it. And so gradually we developed a variety of talents. We with the piano, the violin, we even had harmonica lessons from Virginia Longfellow, and then with the dancing routines, we had a variety of dancing from ballet and acrobatics and tap dancing, and each one had their own little performance. So we were like a little vaudeville troupe. We could put on a show for a woman's club, the St. Patrick's card parties, the Rotary Club. We were very much in demand all over town. The little Babbitt girls would put on the show for social events. Uncle Will had a great love for children, and he always had some little old Irish tale. Sometimes they'd get to spend the night, and he'd tie their clothes in knots and hide little prizes in their clothes or put them in their shoes. And if you'd see him spading out in the garden, they always had a lovely vegetable garden right there in their front yard. Why, he'd always say, he's digging for gold. And he had these little Irish tales. Well, Elizabeth too was Irish. She was the Irish, and no, but they always had these little tales to tell, and they did love the children to visit with them, because they had no children of their own. No father was ever more devoted to his children as babies, and sharing the responsibility of the children were all so young together that it made, and Daddy was always so good to help. It was the minute that he came home from work, which was usually straight up 6 o'clock, he took the bassinet and pulled it through the house with him wherever he went. He took the baby that was in the bassinet. The baby was entirely in his care, and when night came, if a child would cry in the night, he'd say, "I'll call you if I need you, Mother. Stay right there." He was the one who got up, and I only came when it was emergency, when he felt that he absolutely couldn't handle any situation that it was. And he'd take the baby in the bathroom, and he'd rock it, and he'd dry it, and he'd warm it in hot water bottles, and give it even paregoric. He'd do anything that could be done to quiet the baby, get her back to sleep. But through the years, this was a great thing for a mother who was on duty with little children for 24 hours at a time. But very few fathers ever gave a mother that kind of help. There was the bassinet was on wooden wheels, and if he was reading, his foot was out on the round of the end of the bassinet, pushing the bassinet, rocking it gently back and forth. Even remember at the dinner table, when he's eating, bassinet's beside him and his foot's out on it, rocking it back and forth. We used to laugh about how he would hypnotize the baby in the bathroom with a bassinet, and there was a light hanging down on a cord. In those days, a lot of the electricity was that way, and he'd swing the light, finally
make the baby
rock the baby back. There's another thing that Daddy would do to help me with our little routine of practicing before they went to school. Joe would get breakfast while I combed the children's hair, and we had a little bathroom routine, and we'd be all ready for school, and different ones practicing in different rooms, and Daddy would get breakfast for us. He'd serve breakfast to us. And he did this for years, all during their grammar school years. It was a great help to all of us. It gave us the time and space for our little daily routine practice. And he was always so proud of the children. They learned quickly. It was a joy to teach them. They were so responsive, and it was excellent training for them. I don't think any one of them ever went through any stage fright in their lives. It just was a thing unheard of. We were used to whatever we could do. We had each other to perform for, and there was very little competitive spirit. It was more cooperative spirit on the whole thing. We'd work up our little programs, together for each other. Well, when I guess Tess was 8 years old when I was pregnant again, and I had a real rough time having gone through so many pregnancies. I guess my muscles had been weakened, and so I also seemed to carry an awful lot of extra weight, and my hip joints would completely slip out of joint. I couldn't couldn't walk. So I had to spend quite a lot of time in bed. And then when it was close to his birthday, why I went to Mesa to be with Dr. Palmer, who was our family doctor there, and I had such confidence in him. But I was so uncomfortable and so distressed, and the baby seemed to be so huge, and I had never had anything like that. But anyway, the doctors finally decided to induce labor in order to give me some relief, and this put us into a great deal of confusion and trouble, because they did start labor in the hospital, and then it stopped, and they couldn't get it started again. And they gave me shots of Puritan and every inducement, and finally had to put me through a breached birth and take the baby with instruments. And he was such a blue baby that if he hadn't been a boy, they wouldn't have bothered with him. If it had been another girl, they would have just laid him aside. But our first boy, and he was so important, he was such a beautiful specimen of a child. They fought for his life all night long. They never left him, the nurses and the doctors, with every device to keep him breathing. And they finally saved his life. And in the meantime, my own life was in such danger, because with all of this labor-inducing devices they had used on me, then I started hemorrhaging, and it was impossible to get the hemorrhaging stopped. It was just touch and go whether I was going to live after that. But at home, none of the tragedy was relayed to the family. They by 7 o'clock in the morning, they had the news that they had a baby brother. It made me Imogene got on the telephone and called up all my friends at 7 o'clock in the morning to tell them Mama had a baby boy. And there was great jubilation at the business. By the time Joe got down to work, why, his desk was piled up with cowboy boots and overalls and Stetson hats and bolo ties and spurs and congratulations. And then at home, my brother Bill and my cousin Earl Peterson, who were the two men in my family relations down there, they were my two pals. Was my cousin Earl and my brother Bill. So they come over to the hospital in all seriousness and corner my nurse, who was Aunt Nell, my mother's sister, was my nurse, and they ordered her to take out the safety pins. They said they were official inspection, had to make official inspection in order to reassure Joe that he wasn't being hoodwinked, that he was really being told the truth, that he really had a son. And since they were really teasing the nurse, why Aunt Nell refused to touch the safety pins. They finally had to take them out themselves. It was quite a procedure, and everybody was hysterical in the room by the time they went through the performance. But then they sent Joe a telegram that they had made official inspection and that everything was as it should be. I'd like to talk about my mother. She was a small little woman, and never one to not an office holder or anything like that, but a very influential worker, always busy about doing something, for somebody else and helping in every way that she could. But she was, of course, primarily a homemaker. She had a real gift for sewing. She would make our little dresses, and somehow or other there was always a certain sweet little flair. I always felt that when my mother made me a dress that it was special, that it was just a little bit different, a little bit cuter, and a little bit nicer than she had style about her sewing. Had a certain, as I say, flair to it, and I always felt so dressed up when my mother made me a new dress. She had a great deal of my grandmother Peterson's characteristics. I mean, when she laid down the rules for the family conduct and things like that, why she went through them. We knew that we minded her. She had that leadership, but she was very kindly, but she had a sternness about her too, that we respected her authority, and she was such a stalwart character in every way, and always doing, in spite of her many responsibilities and all at home, she was always doing something else, something for the Alder Society, something for the I don't mean Alder Society, but the Relief Society. It was the Mormon church that they all worked. Everybody worked through the Mormon church there. The Mormons lived a very admirable life, and it was a Mormon community that we lived in, and this spirit of helping each other and living a community life. This is fundamentally part of their religion, and they do it very, very faithfully. And she was certainly one of the good workers constantly. And she taught us all how to now wait, where am I? Am I off or on? She allowed us all to help with the canning. We canned fruit and vegetables, just yearly. We canned for the winter supply of food. And of course, living on a farm like we did, we had chickens, turkeys, eggs, fruit, vegetables, fresh when it was, and always canned, when it wasn't. We just had a whole supply. I'll never forget coming home from school. We usually had quite a long walk from school. But when I'd get near home, if my mother had baked fresh bread, I could always smell it. And whenever I'd start smelling my mother's fresh baked bread, I'd start running. And Mother would let us just break off the whole crusty end of the nice fresh loaf. And I'll never forget how good that hot buttered homemade bread tasted right after school. You really are hungry. You have a little old meager lunch at school. And yes, we used to. Sunday was a day when we made ice cream. Of course, we had our own cows and our cream, and we churned our own butter. And home was a whole self-sufficient institution by itself, and everything was always tasted so good. I can remember the things my mother made just were more special. They always were better than what the neighbors would make. I mean, in flavor and the way she cooked them and everything. She was a very special person. We used to always laugh at Mother because she had a great love for music, but she couldn't sing exactly on pitch. But she sang all the time. My mother loved music, and she was always teaching us little rhymes and poetry and songs. But when she would sing with us, she'd so often be just a little bit off pitch, and we didn't ridicule her, except that we, in a friendly way, we all had a good laugh about it. We'd, come on, Mama, sing with us, and she'd sing. But my father had a very special voice. He sang beautifully, and his father, that would be my grandfather Passy, had a magnificent voice. He sang in the church choirs, and he would sing, on request at funerals and parties, and he baritone, and his voice had the quality to have been a professional singer. And as I remember, my father, who I never knew very well at all, but I remember him singing constantly wherever he was. It was just an outburst, a natural outburst, and he had a beautiful voice. My mother was a self-sacrificing personality. I mean, whatever she wanted for us, she was willing to work, sacrifice, save for. And when Dad Shuley bought us, first we had an organ, and right away my mother couldn't play, although her family had an organ. Grandmother Passy's organ is the first one that I ever explored for keyboard, and I realized that a black note meant a certain place on the keyboard. I mean, I figured it out myself. Here's the first line note, I used to teach my children on first line, second line, third line, fourth line, fifth line, right on the piano. Here's your key, here's your staff right here, your first line note. And I figured that out for myself at a very early age, and used to pick out tunes on my grandmother's organ. When Dad Shuley first bought us an organ, immediately my mother insisted that we take music lessons. But my sister was older, and my sister could sing. She had a lovely voice like my father. I had pitch, but I had no voice quality ever. But I had pitch, and as it turns out, I did a lot more with my music through my life than my sister did, who had more natural talent. So in the beginning, my sister was the one who had the organ lessons, but I would stand behind her and watch her and quiz her, and so I learned to play right along with her. She was taking the lessons, but she was also generous enough to let me learn them, so I could play as well as my sister could. In later years, we did have a piano. But in the beginning, we all learned to play on the organ.
We're about
my characteristics are more like my mother and my grandmother Peterson. My sister Lorena's characteristics were more like my father and really the French blood of the family. I mean, they were all for living a happy life without putting the effort into it, and the contrast was of us going on, educating ourselves instead of just enjoying life with as little effort as possible. Why, we all were, more progressive. And in those days, people were, practically everybody was self-educated. Whatever you wanted to learn, constantly, reading and music and reaching out and learning any new craft that came along, and so these characteristics were quite contrasted. The fact that my mother contracted tuberculosis was due to the fact that she took care of an invalid, a man who came to Arizona for his health, and he was in the last stages. And he asked permission to camp on the bank of our canal in one of our fields under some big cottonwood trees that were there. And he was so ill that my mother took his meals to him for months. And in those days, we didn't have